Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. Today we're diving back into the Japanese horror film Iceberg with Tier 5. Just a couple of things up top, we're really starting to get into the more obscure tiers here, and some of these entries are really hard to get a hold of. So you'll notice a few of the movies here are not the best quality, but that's only because that was the only possible version I could find. So thanks for the understanding on that. The research and editing process has definitely gotten a little harder in that regard. Anyway, I don't want to make this any longer than it needs to be, so here is the Japanese horror film Iceberg, Tier 5. Tier 5's description reads, although these films had a release outside of Asia, they've been pretty much forgotten, logged by less than 500 on Letterboxd. Starting with Egg. This movie has a really interesting premise. A woman sees an egg every time she closes her eyes. This has been the case since she was a child, but one day she notices the egg is beginning to crack and a creature is slowly crawling out. It's really weird and really interesting at the same time. The movie actually plays like a horror comedy with some scenes that are straight up laugh out loud funny, and as the movie progresses, it gets more and more over the top. It has a lot of cool visual stuff. I already mentioned the fact that every time the woman closes her eyes, the egg appears, and they do this in a really cool way, and there's a lot of stuff like that in this movie that made it stand out to me. A drowning man. A man finds his wife dead in the bathtub and begins to call an ambulance, but never finishes the call. He instead lays her body down on the couch and drinks himself to sleep. The next day, he's surprised to find his wife waking him up. At first, he's happy, but can't get past the fact that he saw his wife's corpse the night before. He begins to question his sanity and finds that the apartment begins to stink. While the concept itself is fairly disturbing, this movie fits more into the drama category than horror. It seems to be an allegory for divorce, and considering it was done on almost no budget and takes place entirely in the apartment, it's remarkably interesting and well acted. Dead Girl Walking. Dead Girl Walking might be one of the most depressing movies on the Iceberg, and maybe one of the most artistic. It's actually part of Hideshi Hino's Theater of Horror, which is a collection of 6 horror short films based on Hideshi Hino's mangas. When I first covered these movies, I actually didn't really know much about Hideshi Hino, and after I did the disturbing manga Iceberg, I became a huge fan, so if you like some of the concepts in the Theater of Horror movies, definitely check out his comics. A girl named Sayuri is pronounced dead, but for some reason she continues to live while her body slowly deteriorates and rots. It's one of those films that's so interesting, I want to just tell you everything, so spoilers ahead. So her family gets sick of the rotting flesh smell and shows up in her room one day with a jug of gasoline ready to light her on fire. So yeah, the movie's messed up right from the get-go. By the way, Sayuri is nothing but sweet the entire time, and you can't help but feel bad for her because it's not her fault she's a walking zombie. Anyway, she runs and the mom tries to stab her, which leaves a big nasty gash on her arm. Sayuri yanks the knife out of her arm, which incidentally stabs her mom through the eyeball, who has the most blood-curdling scream. Somehow she manages to escape, and as she finally gets outside to safety, she sees some of her classmates. She approaches them covered in a black robe, but as she does, her arm falls off and rolls out from under the robe. So understandably, the classmates freak out, and Sayuri just slowly walks away looking sad as hell like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh or something. Now it's getting dark, and the poor girl takes shelter in a farmer's shack or shed or something, but the farmer finds her in the morning pissed off, and when she tries to explain herself to him, her tongue falls out. And I gotta say, the look on the farmer's face is kind of hilarious, but he tells her to beat it, so once again she wanders around all sad. Well, some weird looking guy is driving by and asks if she needs food or anything. Even after seeing her dead face, he offers her a place to rest, and she seems to trust him. Then she wakes up in a completely black room with just a spotlight on her, and an old man comes out and whips her before presenting her to a group of men in suits all sitting in chairs in a circle. So basically the old guy runs a sort of freak show and starts showing her off to these guys. It starts by a guy looking under her robe and puking, and this escalates to the point where her intestines just plop out onto the ground and everyone just starts clapping. It's a truly bizarre fever dream that feels like a nightmare. The old guy ends up dumping her off in the woods where she has a dream that she's normal again, but things go sour and she wakes up with large parts of her face falling off. She sees her own reflection in a nearby lake, and it's really one of the creepiest parts to me because although it's not very clear, through the blurry reflection you just see this creepy half face. Well, out of nowhere her mom and dad show up with more gasoline, I guess ready to finish the job. I mean, what the hell? So at this point, Sayuri can barely walk correctly and even loses a foot. So the mom inevitably catches up to her, and with a bandage now covering her eye, she lights up the gasoline. The gas causes an explosion that sends Sayuri flying through the air, and everything goes white. We now just see the robe lying in a completely white environment, and I guess some of Sayuri is in there because it slowly crawls like a slug toward a dead flower. As Sayuri reaches the flower, it begins to bloom, and that is Dead Girl Walking. I know it seems like I kind of just ruined the whole movie, but I really didn't, because the atmosphere, music, cinematography, everything in this movie adds up in an exceptional way. So you just have to watch it for yourself because it's really sad and really mesmerizing. It's also only about 40 minutes long, so it's definitely worth the watch. Lizard Baby. Lizard Baby is exactly what it sounds like. This is another short from Hideshi Hino's Theater of Horror. So this movie's really strange, but it's about a horror writer who can't seem to come up with any ideas for a new screenplay. His wife is pregnant, and after a checkup, he gets a brilliant idea. What if he wrote a movie about a man whose wife is pregnant and gives birth to a lizard? So his wife's like, what the hell? I'm actually pregnant. You can't be writing stories like that. But the dude ignores her and does it anyway. Well, here's the clinker. Obviously, the story he's writing ends up actually happening to him. His wife becomes pregnant with a half human, half lizard hybrid and gives birth to the thing. So now the guy has to deal with having a half lizard baby while also going into production on a movie about that exact premise. It's kind of wild on a couple of different levels. The thing is, it's not a scary movie at all, and it actually comes off pretty funny, but I don't know if that was intentional or not. Like, the baby itself is just kind of a shitty practical effect, like something you'd see from the 80s. It kind of looks like a knockoff of the baby from Dinosaurs, actually. It's not really gory or anything other than a little bit of blood. It's just with the baby being goofy looking and the circumstances being so weird, it does come off very comedic and surreal, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's only a 50-minute film, so there's plenty to work with here, making it pretty entertaining. Boy from Hell. Boy from Hell is also part of Hideshi Hino's Theater of Horror collection, and this one is sort of along the same lines as The Lizard Baby, but a lot creepier and way darker. It's still pretty funny though, and hard to take too seriously. Basically, a mother and son are being driven by the family servant. The young boy sticks his head out the window as a truck drives past them, and it knocks his freaking head off. Man, one thing I notice in these Japanese movies is they are not afraid to show children dying. Anyway, the mom is obviously distraught, and her and the servant cry over the boy's grave when all of a sudden a crazy old lady comes out of nowhere and basically says, hey, I know how to bring your kid back. See, what you got to do is take this fang and slice the throat of another kid that's the same age as your son. Easy as that. So the servant tells the old baddie bitch to hit the road, and she drops the fang and she leaves. So the mom is a doctor, and this is where the movie becomes really messed up. But next thing we know, she snatches up one of her patients, a little boy, and is driving him somewhere when he wakes up like, what is going on here? And this evil psycho tells the kid that he's cured and going home, and the poor boy looks so happy and excited to leave the hospital. But I swear to God, it cuts from his smiling face to him now being shrunk upside down and crying. The servant shows up and tries to talk some sense into her, but to no avail as she slices the throat of this little boy, which we actually see on screen. Well, it turns out that old lady was right, and her son comes crawling out of his grave, but here's the thing, he's half alive and half dead and can only survive by eating human organs. Sounds pretty disturbing, and it kind of is in concept, but when you see this little guy, you'll probably laugh because it's very clear that it is just a little person playing a boy. He's even got a man's voice that tries and fails to sound like a boy, which is mostly why this movie is so funny. So from here on out, it's honestly just this zombie kid eating people. The makeup on his face is both creepy and funny at the same time. It really confuses the senses watching this movie because on one hand, it's laughable, and on the other hand, if you saw this man-boy zombie in the middle of the night, you wouldn't be laughing, you'd be freaking running. Anyway, much like Lizard Baby, this one is worth watching, and it's only 50 minutes long. Man, Woman, and the Wall. While it does have a cool and ominous name, Man, Woman, and the Wall is actually about a dude listening to his hot neighbor through their thin apartment walls and pleasuring himself. Yeah, that's the whole movie. I think the horror comes into play because the act itself is disturbing, and there are times in the girl's apartment where they try to represent the idea that he's listening to her, and they'll show him squatting right next to her, listening even though he's not actually there. It's kind of an interesting visual. His obsession does get more and more creepy, and this does culminate into some really disturbing scenes. Embalming. This is about a young embalmer. She's doing her thing on a body before a funeral when she finds a strange needle deep in its skin. The next day, the man's body is found headless, so now the embalmer tries to track it down and ends up getting entangled in a weird religious cult. It's no Orozco, obviously, but it's a suspenseful thriller with an embalmer as the protagonist, which is pretty interesting. St. John's Wort. So St. John's Wort is actually based on a Super Famicom game from 1992. The game plays more like a visual novel than a traditional video game. The film released in 2001, almost 10 years later. It follows ex-lovers Koei and Nami as they go back to visit Nami's childhood home. Strange things happen in the house as they explore each room, and they get the feeling someone's watching them. There's some twists and turns and scares, but ultimately it's an interesting haunted house movie. Crazy Lips. Crazy Lips is really bizarre horror. Unfortunately, this movie is almost impossible to find, and I couldn't get a hold of it myself, but I gathered all the information I could, and basically from what I understand, people say it's a real genre bender type movie. The basic plot is that a woman seeks a psychic's help after her brother is accused of beheading 4 schoolgirls, and shit just gets really crazy after that. Apparently there's everything from major gore to incest and nudity, so it seems like a really wacky movie. A lot of people label it as a horror comedy, although I've heard that it's all over the place, even including random musical numbers. So I definitely want to get a hold of this film at some point to see what all the fuss is about. Evil Dead Trap 3. Evil Dead Trap 2 has actually nothing to do with the first 2 movies, but is just another example of international marketing, as the film's true title is The Brutal Insanity of Love. It's about a detective trying to solve a murder and having to figure out who the killer is between several suspects. Many have said that it's the worst of the 3 Dead Trap films, and at least Evil Dead Trap 1 and 2 share the similarity of being really gory, whereas this one is maybe the most boring in that regard, with almost no brutal deaths. I wish I had more to say about it, but that's all I got. The Booth. The Booth is about a radio DJ who starts getting really creepy calls that repeatedly call him a liar. As the radio show goes on, he slowly starts to break down as the calls hint at the DJ's dark past. It's a suspenseful one, and I have to give credit because it's very low budget, and a lot of the movie takes place in the booth other than some flashback sequences, and you know I love the less is more approach. Shikoku. Shikoku follows Hinako, who after living in Tokyo for a few years moves back to her hometown in Shikoku. She learns that one of her childhood friends, Sayuri, died several years ago, and that Sayuri's mother is overwhelmed with grief. Hinako begins seeing Sayuri's ghost at night and soon learns that her mother has a strange past involving seances and exorcisms. So it looks like there's a connection, and after that things get really spooky. I guess Shikoku in Japanese is a play on words because it means 4 islands, to which Shikoku is the second smallest island behind Okinawa in Japan, but it also means land of the dead. So that's kind of rad. Kyofu, or the Sylvian experiment. This movie is all about psychic phenomenon. 2 neurosurgeons discover a 16mm film reel that shows test subjects that begin to project a white light seemingly with their minds. The neuroscientist kids watch it as well, and years later they begin to conduct a similar experiment that's initiated by a mock mass suicide. One daughter wakes up inside of a facility where it appears that she's astral projecting outside of her body, which appears to be dead. She ends up escaping the facility, but now all kinds of supernatural, psychic, astral projecting, dream jumping, all kinds of shit starts happening. So if you're into that area of horror, it's an interesting story to check out. The Last Supper. This one is messed up, but we haven't tackled cannibalism in a while on the iceberg, so why not? The movie's about a plastic surgeon who develops a taste for human flesh. His ex-lover is getting married, and he tells her he will prepare the food for all the wedding guests, and you can guess what kind of meat he decides to use. Most of the graphic stuff in this movie is seen through flashbacks as he develops his cannibalistic habit. First, he tastes some fat after a liposuction, which is somehow the most disgusting idea in the movie, but maybe that's just me. Well, he ends up enjoying it, so he travels to Hong Kong and watches a messed up show where they literally behead a woman in front of everyone and serve her head on a literal platter. He also finds a woman's corpse after she hangs herself and takes her body home to slowly eat it. This is probably the most graphic scene, but the budget is low and the effects aren't very good, so every time we see a body being cut up, it always just kind of looks like a mannequin. It's still disturbing, but after watching Guinea Pig 2, it just seems hokey. During all of this, the detective is slowly trying to piece things together, which adds some suspense, but you gotta watch it just for the ending when he finally serves the food to the wedding guests. Love Ghost. Love Ghost plays a little more like a drama romance movie, but definitely has horror elements. It follows schoolgirl Midori, who moves back to her hometown and is pleasantly surprised to find her old friend Ryusuke still lives there and is in her class. Rumors about a beautiful boy fortune teller who appears at a nearby shrine start popping up, and they say that the boy's beauty is enough to make a girl's heart stop. It doesn't sound too scary, but people start mysteriously dying around the same time, so we got a good old supernatural mystery on our hands. There's really no gore or anything like that, but if you're looking for more drama horror with a little bit of romance on the side, check it out. Zoo. So Zoo is another collection of short films, all written by horror author Otsuichi. It's just the one name, Otsuichi, like Cher or something. Anyway, Otsuichi wrote these 5 novels, and then 5 different directors made shorts based on them. So let's start with Kazari and Yoko. The mother of twin sisters, Kazari and Yoko, loves only one of her daughters and abuses the other. The abused one gets sick of it and tries to escape. Honestly, this one is just really sad more than anything else. Next is 7 Rooms. One day, a young boy and his older sister find themselves trapped in a small concrete room. There are 7 rooms in all, each containing a different prisoner. After 6 days in the rooms, everyone will be murdered if they don't escape. There's a little waterway that connects the rooms together, and the boy is just small enough to swim through it to the different rooms. So it's actually really interesting, and it kind of feels like Saw, but without the intense torture and more of the problem solving. In the next short, So Far, a young boy's father is convinced that his mother is dead. The mother is convinced the father is dead, so the boy is the only person that both father and mother can see. This is a really cool concept, and watching the boy try to navigate this situation is pretty heartbreaking. When the Sun Shines is a CG animation about a scientist who seems to have created an android, and it's just kind of philosophical as he learns about the world that now has no more humans. I might be getting that wrong, but I watched it without the subtitles and was guessing. Once again, it's kind of a sad one without a lot of horror, but more existential dread. In Zoo, a man kills a woman at an abandoned zoo and takes pictures of her dead body every day. That's really the bulk of it, but I have to say, it's told in an interesting way, and there's a really cool and disturbing part where the guy is holding all these pictures after 100 or so days and flips through them like a flip book, so you see her rotted body slowly form back to the night he killed her, and that's just a really cool idea. It has a kind of surreal ending that I don't even know if I can explain, so check it out for yourself. So that's Zoo. It's an interesting collection and definitely makes me want to check out more of Otsuichi's stuff. Being Natural. Being Natural is a pretty interesting one. It feels very different than a lot of the horror movies on this list because for the most part, it's a simple slice of life film about three old guys just goofing off in the country with a humorous tone and a laid-back feel. A family move into the area from the city and they seem really nice. However, the wife's dream is to open up a cafe and will do this no matter what cost. The movie's third act takes a very unexpected turn and things get drastically out of hand. Some people love this movie for the ending and some hate it for the same reason. I kind of like divisive films like that though because it leaves a lot of room for conversation. Shady. Shady's about a bullied high school girl named Misa who suddenly gets befriended by a popular girl in school, Izumi. Seems great for a while as the relationship blossoms, but gets really weird when Izumi turns into a complete psycho. She kills Misa's bird and tries to feed it to her. She has this weird relationship with one of the male teachers and she locks a classmate in the closet before slitting her throat. The thing that makes Izumi interesting is that she does all of this typically with a big smile on her face, which makes it way more disturbing. Overall, it's a pretty cool thriller, so check it out. Kirei. Kirei, The Beauty of Terror is a body horror film centered around plastic surgery. It follows Yoko, a surgeon specializing in cosmetic surgery. One day, a deformed and disfigured woman named Yoshi shows up at Yoko's place and hands her 3 million yen. She asks if Yoko will fix her messed up face, but only if it's done after dark without any other people involved. So Yoko's like, nah, too risky, screw that, until the woman hands her another 3 million yen. And Yoko can't refuse, so she accepts her offer. So Yoshi shows up, fills out some forms, and goes under the knife. This is where the real body horror comes into play as we see Yoko cut open her eyelids and remove fat, all while Yoshi is awake and staring, which is really creepy to watch. So after the surgery is complete, Yoshi says she now wants her entire torso redone and offers Yoko 5 million yen. At this point, she asks her where she's getting all the money, and she avoids the question. So most people would jump off the boat here because something smells fishy and it ain't the eyelid fat getting warm on a kidney dish. But I guess Yoko's strapped for cash and does more surgery on this crazy lady, and this one is so gross. We see Yoshi getting liposuction and yellow fat is sucked from her belly as she yells for more and more to be removed. She then demands an operation to fix her vag as well and gives Yoko even more money. So later Yoshi calls up and is addicted, wanting even more surgery, and finally Yoko just tells her no. So later Yoko's banging her doctor boyfriend on the operation table while Yoshi watches like a creep from the window. So spoilers after this point, but a couple of weird things begin to happen. Like for instance, Yoko finds her red wine has been replaced with blood, and soon after one of the nurses prepares to clean her face and finds that the facial cleanse had been replaced by acid, which literally starts melting her face off. Also, some old coos shows up at one point to inform Yoko that one of the breast implants she didn't sit right, and now one of her titties is disfigured and rotting. Ugh. She refuses Yoko's offer to fix it and chews her out. At this point, Yoko's getting all messed up mentally and starts thinking she's seeing Yoshi everywhere, but can't find any information on her since she used a fake name. Well, one day she pops into her office and finds that her boyfriend is having an affair with some other chick, and it turns out that it's Yoshi. She also starts choking the guy out while he's humping her, so the guy faints as Yoko barges in to stop it, and Yoshi goes full crazy, insulting Yoko and starts laughing maniacally until her damn nose replacement breaks off like Michael Jackson. So now there's blood pouring from her face, and the boyfriend wakes up in time for Yoshi to cut the poor bastard's throat and then start to strangle Yoko. Yoko then stabs her in the nose, which causes it to become even more messed up, and Yoshi tries to chase her, but her leg enhancements snap so she can't walk properly. This psycho hose beast then crawls crawls over to the dead boyfriend so she can die in his arms, I guess out of spite, and tells Yoko that she hates her and that she abuses ugly people before dying. Fast forward a few years, and Yoko has now had plastic surgery and started over with a new clinic until a patient that looks eerily similar to Yoshi shows up one day and asks for surgery. It's a very interesting movie to me because a lot of the time body horror movies rely on either sci-fi or really dark torture, but this one takes a unique route with the surgery stuff, so I gotta respect that. Overall, I will say the actual gore and scares in this movie are few and far between, but there's a lot of sex in it, so there's that. Kichiku, Banquet of Beasts. This movie follows a group of left-wing extremists that really act more like a cult. They all live in a house in the woods, and when the group's leader commits suicide in jail, all hell breaks loose and everyone starts doing all kinds of messed up things to each other. That's basically the whole movie. And maybe I'm not being fair, but for God's sake, the first scene of the movie is a sex scene where all you see is a man's bare ass that goes way too long. Anyway, I thought it'd be fun to read the IMDb Parents Guide just so you guys can get a taste of the disturbing stuff that happens. So the Parents Guide says, all of these scenes are shown in gory graphic detail. Much of what happens is often shown in close-up, and the aftermaths are often shown for minutes at a time. A man is stabbed in the face, a man is tied to a tree trunk and beaten over and over again for almost 10 minutes before being shot in the face with a shotgun. We see the top of his face get blown off and we see his brain splattered. A man is castrated, a man breaks his leg and then is shot in the stomach. We see his stomach explode and we see his guts fall out. We see a man get his hand cut off with a sword. He then is slashed open and decapitated. We see a man get impaled through the head with a sword. We see a man cut his own throat. That's just a little taste of it, but you get the idea. This movie is just a crazy gore fest. And to finish up this tier, All Night Long 2. Man, the first All Night Long movie had some messed up stuff, but All Night Long 2 takes it to a whole nother level of deviance. It doesn't seem to have any connection to the first film other than the main character is another nerdy guy wearing glasses, similar to one of the main characters in the first movie. The nerd in question is named Shunoichi, and the movie follows as he basically gets mixed up with a violent gang and all kinds of messed up stuff happens. I'll give you the gist of it, including some of the more disturbing stuff. Well, Shunoichi is walking down the street one day when he's approached by a man in white. In previous scenes, we actually see this dude in white killing small rodents and putting their guts in a pile. He smiles and offers Shunoichi protection, but it quickly cuts to the gang stripping him naked and beating him, but they eventually let him go. It seems like the guy in white has a thing for Shunoichi or something. It's really weird. He asks Shunoichi to hang out with him and they eat dinner together in an apartment, but when the man starts advancing on Shunoichi, he's not into it. So the guy pulls a knife on him and brings out a girl who's clearly mentally broken and possibly drugged as she tries to eat up some of the scraps of food like a dog. This is one of the most disturbing just because of how messed up the girl seems to be, and they show a close-up of her fingers where the gang ripped off her nails, which just makes me cringe. The man in white stabs her in the hand and pours milk all over her for some reason. So they stabbed her, drugged her, and pulled her fingernails off, but pouring milk on a lady? I mean, that's where I draw the line. He starts to manipulate Shunoichi now and gives him a whip to inflict pain on the girl while he watches from a security monitor. Well, the girl ends up blowing him and then puking on his face, so that's nice. The guy in white comes back and beats her almost to death, and they ditch her body in a garbage heap. After this incident, Shunoichi meets up with a hacker friend that he met online along with another guy. They all hang out that night, and one of them invites his girlfriend to come over as well. Well, they're all having fun when all of a sudden the gang shows up and things get very out of hand. The one hacker friend is forced to watch as they drug and abuse his girlfriend in front of him. The gang then puts her in the bathtub and starts washing her for whatever reason. What is up with this movie? Anyway, the gang leader then turns the water to scalding hot, and for whatever reason, Shunoichi, who's now becoming mentally deranged or something, just starts slow clapping. So yeah, he's totally lost it, or at least the gang leader's manipulation is paying off. They then give the hacker a knife and tell him to slash up his girlfriend or else get killed. In a big twist, the dude uses the knife to stab one of the gang members and then almost John Wick style kills all of them. It's really rad, and I have to say, a little bit of satisfying revenge. So now Shunoichi, who's just completely demented or whatever, pours gas on the gang leader's face and lights it on fire. I mean, the guy probably deserved it, but man, that's messed up. Meanwhile, the hacker and his girlfriend are banging in the next room, right next to the bed she was just assaulted on. Damn, dude, you couldn't go get help? How bad did you need to nut? You couldn't wait? Anyway, Shunoichi is now totally corrupted, slaughters the couple, and laughs. So that's All Night Long 2. Definitely more messed up than the first one, and gets to the action way quicker as well. Thank you everyone for watching. Next we'll be getting into tier 6, so stay tuned for that. And a big thank you to my patrons, Naomi Romero, Soma, Krusty the Krab, One Group, Ali Morgan, Laz Wishgender, Malediction, Hunter Piva, Tora, Heather M, Creepypasta Cube, A Slightly Bigger Ant, Hannah Broadstreet, K.A., Ricky Shadow, Chase Middleton, Koi Kohi, Matt Rozak, and Momomochi. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support. If you want a shout out like that at the end of every video, as well as bonus content and a grief sticker, consider joining the Patreon. But I appreciate you guys watching at all, so thank you. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.